Thanks, Leslie. Yeah, can I just say I'm a bit upset, because when she said, oh, we've known each other for over 30 years, none of you gasped like how Debra's not been alive that long. Seriously, we need to work on this. Anyway, thank you so much for having me. I've been so incredibly excited about this conference today, actually. I mean, when Leslie asked me to do it a while ago, and I've been researching, briefing, I can probably quote stats at you that you don't even know you know. So I've been really, really excited and inspired and kind of angry by equal measure in some of the things I've been looking at, and just feel such a privilege to be here today. So I think we're going to do some really good work. I should say welcome to our delegates who are joining us online and remotely from this whole, this is a brand new experience for me. So, and I've just actually had a text from my PA and my team back in London saying, we're watching you, boss. So I'm now feeling really intimidated and actually quite annoyed, because I could have faked it and said I'm in Hull chairing a conference and gone off shopping, but I can't now because they can see where I am. Anyway. I also want to tell you that I'm a passionate person, as Leslie said, and a few years ago I was giving a keynote speech in Melbourne, in Adelaide, no, Melbourne, oh, anyway, in Australia somewhere. And the chair of the conference described me as the Duracell bunny with the potty mouth, because I get passionate and I occasionally forget, you know, to sort of use more professional language. Anyway, it was fine, it was Australia, they were fine with it. And but then, one chap at the end came up to me and he did complain. He did say, look, you know, I enjoyed what you had to say, Deborah, but, you know, all that stuff about there are much better words you can use in the English language, blah, 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 you know, really, you know, etc. And of course I was mortified because I don't want to offend anybody. That wasn't what I set out to do. So I listened carefully to his feedback, and then I gave the only response possible. I told him to bugger off. So, at that same conference, there was a woman called Amanda Gore who spoke about the fact that in every human being, there is a spark within us. And that we have a spark, and that our job really as human beings is to ignite the sparks in other people. She called, you know, these people spirit igniters, and I think that's part of what we need to be in the voluntary sector generally, in the advice sector in particular. We need to be those spark igniters, because part of our job is to be purveyors of hope. If we don't feel that there is hope, we can't pass hope on to those people that we're serving, to our beneficiaries. But that can be quite difficult when we're facing some of the challenges that we have to face. So one of my challenges to you today is to try and maintain that spark, that spirit, to be a spark igniter during the day. Resist the temptation to be what Amanda Gore called a fuffer. Do you know when a light, a torch or a candle, when you blow it out, it makes this noise? She called the people who blow out your sparks fuffers. So today we don't want any fuffers. What we want is spark igniters. The purpose of the conference largely is twofold really today. It's firstly to look at how the advice sector can work together. So continuing the work of the Advice Forward Partnership, which Leslie referred to. This is about getting it better for beneficiaries really, to improving their experiences, to getting outcomes better for them, to playing to our strengths in this sector, and to increase our quality, which is pretty good already, and also our skills in this sector altogether. But it's also to look at and talk about how the public sector, including local authorities and health commissioners, might work together with us in the advice sector better to improve the quality of decision making, and again about these outcomes, because the whole point of today is not about us. It's not about who we get on with and who we don't get on with. It's not even about where the money is or where the money isn't. It's all about our beneficiaries, our clients, the people we are here to serve. That's all today is about. So some questions for today might be, can we transform our thinking? And if we can, how would we go about doing that? How do we start by commissioning for outcomes, for what is going to serve beneficiaries in a way that's about them, that starts with them as the key thing that we're here for, rather than the other way around? And more importantly, how can we work better together? Inevitably, we're going to have challenges, we're not always going to get on with each other, but we do need to work together, because when we come together, we're more powerful and more effective for our beneficiaries, for those people that we're there to serve. The driver for the event has been 3 key reports, which many of you may have read or come across. Advice, Support and Poverty, which is an evidence review which was undertaken by Damon Gibbons, actually, who's our next speaker, which is supported by the Joseph Rowntree Foundation. The Low Commission's reports, Tackling the Advice Deficit and Getting It Right in Social Welfare Law, and we're incredibly privileged to have Lord Lowe actually here as a speaker today. And they give us, these reports give, and also, some of the Citizens Advice Bureau's own research and evidence. And these reports give us some really serious things to think about. For example, to remind you, the Low Commission estimated that there would be £130 million cut from advice funding in England and Wales. And the second report, published a year on, found that there is still a massive advice deficit, and it is growing. And in the Getting It Right in Social Welfare report, Law gives indicators of the alarming evidence of critical and unmet need. We don't know the exact numbers, but we in this room know there are far too many. The new official figures from the Department of Work and Pensions shows that the number of people in the UK living in absolute poverty has risen over the last 2 years, and there are now 10.6 million people in absolute poverty. That's shocking, shocking, shocking. That's a massive job that we can do something about. And according to the CLG's report, the English Indices of Deprivation, 15.3% of the population in the Yorkshire and Humber region are living in income deprivation, and that's about 10% in Hull. I mean, we should be pissed off about that, and from the look of your faces, you are. We need to be doing something about those things. So there's a big problem here, particularly in this region. You have the poorest people. The poorest people. Is there money available to help them? Well, you already know about the cuts in public sector funding. Now, part of what we do at my organisation, Directory of Social Change, Leslie mentioned, is we research into where money is given. So, can we turn to companies for help? Well, DSC did some research into company giving. We published a company giving almanac 2 years ago, and we looked at company giving in the UK. Companies in Britain overall contribute less than 2% of all the cash that comes into the voluntary sector anywhere at all. That amounts to about £700 million a year, which is just slightly more than one organisation, the Big Lottery, distributes across England and Wales. Absolutely appalling. The total cash contributions of companies are about 0.3% of pre-tax profit. Yorks and Humber is the third highest area of income deprivation in the UK, and you get, guess how much company money? None, or at least so little that it doesn't even register on our data points. Companies give about 0.5% of the money they give to housing and homelessness, and about 4% to poverty and social exclusion across the UK, which is about £2 million and about £28 million respectively. Guess how much of that comes to this region? Yeah, you're right, pretty much none, or at least not enough that registers on any of our data scales. So companies are not going to help you. So where do you turn then? What about trusts and foundations? Well, £61 million of all of the funding designated for England is given England-wide from trusts and foundations. We also do research on that. I'll show you the books later. Within England, unsurprisingly or surprisingly, depending on how you look at it, Greater London gets the largest amount of money, about 108 million of the available regional funding, followed by the South East. So the two richest parts of the country get most of the money. It doesn't really make any sense. The areas of greatest deprivation get the least amount of money. So the Southwest, which is another very deprived area, gets 7.4% of all the trust and foundation money, which is about 26 million. The North East receives about 25 million. The East gets about 6.8%. The East Midlands comes last with only 6% of all the funding available, which is about 21 million. And Yorkshire and the Humber is second to last with only 6.5%, 23 million. Yet you are the third largest area of deprivation in the UK. Nobody's giving you money. Nobody's giving you money. This is why what you do matters so much. The rest of what I'm going to say before we go into our opening speakers, you are going to know or be familiar with, but I just want to remind you so you know the context that we're working in for the day. I read somewhere, I can't remember who it was, but that any one of us might find ourselves at a point in our lives when we need advice for one reason or another, and we get into difficulty, we get into debt. I've been there. I'm sure many of us in the room have ourselves, never mind the people we serve. And somebody said, and I couldn't track it down, but I can't remember who it was, but somebody said everybody in work is only 3 paychecks away from homelessness. I don't know if you've heard that, but somebody said that, and that makes a lot of sense to me. And the drivers of the need for advice are normal life things that happen to many of us: divorce, loss of employment, death, separation, development of long-term conditions and stuff like that, which can happen to absolutely everybody. Gordon in 2010 found that a majority of people experience at least a year below the poverty line once in a lifetime. Some people, as you guys will know, move into relative poverty, and with support it's temporary, they're able to get out of it. Others experience a long-term persistent problem, and of course, as you know, the risks are higher for quite a lot of vulnerable people, pensioners, long-term health problems and so forth, people you're very, very familiar with in your everyday work. And of course, it isn't just about those sorts of issues. It's also, poverty, debt, all that kind of thing. It leads to issues with health, with general well-being, with relationships, with even just the ability to heat your own house and have a decent standard of living. That it's such an all-pervasive problem. And in fact, the Low Commission showed that level of affluence, degree or education really isn't a predictor of how, how likely you are to get into difficulty. But it is, of course, the most vulnerable and deprived who are more likely to fall into difficulty and who are going to find it hardest to get out, and who are also going to find it hardest to access the support, which is why what you guys do is so critical. And what you do is working. You are helping to reduce poverty. The CAB reports 1.7 billion in additional benefits and tax credits gone to clients. And there's an average ongoing entitlement of about £6,500 per annum. So that's great. Although, as Les and I were discussing, access to the benefits doesn't necessarily reduce the poverty if the benefits isn't enough in the first place. A lot of people where they manage their money quite well, but the money they've got just isn't enough. And we were talking about that yesterday. There's also the point about people often turn to you in the advice sector at a point of crisis, and really we need to try to get them to come at a point of decision making. So before they make the decisions that send them down the route in which they get into real difficulty. So that's a real challenge for us. Information and education at the early stages in their lives. So your work is so important. You have primary impacts, which is about improved financial circumstances for families, retention of employment, security of the family home, and so on. Then, of course, secondary impacts. When you help people, they eat better, they have warmer houses, they actually have better lives. And of course, the wider impact you have is about physical and mental health, and mental health in particular, which is a massive problem in this country at the moment. And you help to manage that, believe it or not. It might not feel like it at that point with that one individual that you're actually helping society as a whole, because it's hard to see that in that one moment, but you really are. Thanks to advice, generally CAB and all other kind of advice. I think we've got energy use data sharing, the FCA regulation of credit brokers and unauthorised fees, clamping down on payday loans and that absolutely egregious 4,000% interest rates on those, the LA guidance about use of bailiffs, the Money Advice Trust and the Royal College of Psychiatrists and Rethink, training for debt recovery staff in awareness and response to mental health issues among debtors, prevention of homelessness, access to services. All of these things are things you're getting right. You are getting these things right. And it's more than just that. There are also non-measurable benefits, which are probably just as important. When you're in that situation of being in difficulty and being in distress, just knowing that somebody's on your side, just knowing that you're not being judged, that someone is not making, things in their head about why you got into this place, but they're just there to help you out. That sense of hope, the relief of stress, believing that there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and that this situation that they're in is not all of life, it's just part of life. You cannot put a value on that, what you do for those people. You massively contribute to human beings in ways that you probably can't even imagine. Recent research by Kite, in association with 10 Citizens Advice Bureau, looked at delivering advice from GP advice settings, which I know is one of the issues on the agenda today. And it looked at how it improved accessibility to advice, but also about empowerment of clients. And the clients reported a range of positive outcomes, and I think this is so impressive. I almost couldn't believe these figures, actually, but it's incredible. 80% of them felt that they were now in control of the problem. 75% of them felt that they knew more about the law and about their rights under it. 66% of them felt they were better able to enforce those rights. 65% felt they were able to have a say in decisions that affect them. They didn't feel quite so helpless. 64% felt that they would be able to deal with similar problems in the future in a much more effective way. And that 59% felt they had more control over their life in the way that they want. That is amazing. Those are amazing results. And we can do more. On top of all of that, though, never mind just about the direct service and support you provide and the indirect benefits it have, that you give to people at vulnerable points in their lives. Your use of volunteers is absolutely amazing, because what you do by using volunteers as extensively as you do is you engage people to help others in their communities. And when you do that, that helps to build community cohesion. It helps to educate our citizens generally that we are a better society when we share and when we support each other, when we feel responsible for those people around us. It raises awareness of the very real social challenges some human beings face, and hopefully starts to break down some of those prejudices and nonsense that's fed by the tabloid press and by the irresponsible broadcast media. And it breaks down barriers within and between communities and cities. You're going to have a lot of input today about how tough times are, rightly so. We need to hear those things. And so you have never, ever been more important and necessary. And you know, I know and I get a sense that you can feel a little bit beaten down sometimes. The challenges are so huge, the lack of money, the scale of the problems, the increasing number of beneficiaries and clients that are coming to you. But it reminded me of there's a chap called Francis James Child who collected a whole load of like old folk ballads and things like that. At the end of the 19th century, all sorts, so stories of Arthur and things like that. And there's one particular ballad, it's called Child Ballad number 167, and it's about, it describes a chap called Sir Andrew Barton. He was a classic 16th century sort of sailor pilot, you know, one of those chaps who was allegedly a sailor, but, you know, held up other ships on the sea and nicked things. Anyway, there's a particular battle in which this chap, Sir Andrew Barton, is wounded, and as he lies there, sort of in a little bit of pain, he says to his men, "Fight on, my men, fight on. I am hurt, but I am not slain. I will lay me down and bleed a while, and then I'll rise to fight again." Today is a day for us to rise and fight again together. Today is about finding that spark that I referred to earlier and fanning it, so that by the time we get to 4 o'clock, we feel inspired, we feel energized, we've got direction for our anger, we've got relationships, we've got purpose, so that we are going to get better results for our beneficiaries. I can't wait. It's going to be a brilliant day. I'm now going to hand over to our first formal speaker of the day, Damon Gibbons. Damon is the director of the Sensible?
Yes, well,
should we name it, Damon? Of the Centre for Responsible Credit. The Twitter handle is @ResponsibleCred, if you're interested. This is a dedicated policy unit focused on credit regulation, over-indebtedness and financial inclusion within the Centre for Economic and Social Inclusion. His evidence review, Advice, Support and Poverty, which was produced jointly with Sarah Foster, underpins some of our discussions today. As I mentioned, it was supported by the Joseph Rowntree Foundation as part of their all-encompassing strategy to reduce poverty across the UK. He's the published author of a book, Britain's Personal Debt Crisis, How We Got Here and What to Do About It, that's recently been published, and he's had 20 plus years, that many, Damon, really,
yeah,
working in the field of disadvantaged groups and communities. So please join me in welcoming Damon Gibbons.